What is up, everybody? Welcome to the second episode of the Guerrilla Social Work podcast. This is Justin. Joining me again, of course, on the podcast is going to be my friends and colleagues, Mace and Jeff. We are going to be getting into a little bit of background as to why we started up the podcast. What does Guerrilla Social Work mean? Some of the history behind how that phrase got up and running and how that turned into a podcast today. So we'll end up getting into that. Also, Guerrilla Social Work Podcast brought to you by Alpha Counseling and Treatment, which provides emotional strength for healthier living through individual, group, and family therapy services. If you'd like to check out more on the services provided there, you can check out utahsbesttherapy.com. Otherwise, we're just going to dive right into the second episode here. Like I said, some of the background on the Guerrilla Social Work, where that comes from, and how that ended up turning into a podcast. So stay tuned.
Episode 2.
No, wait, no. This is the prequel.
Episode pre-1, 2.
Episode prequel.
This is like
Point 2.
It's point 4
This is the Monsters University to Monsters Inc.
It's the Monsters
Gotcha.
Inc.
I don't know if that's a good prequel, but
This is the Guerrilla Social Work prequel.
this is the Prometheus to Alien.
Yeah. That's a problem. Yeah.
R.I.P.
we're
Bill
Screwed. It's off to a
Paxton.
bad start.
Listen, Bill Paxton.
Dude, that show was the shit, though. You got to admit, Alien.
Twister.
The original Alien.
Twister? Yeah.
The original Alien. After that, it sucked. I thought.
What? You're saying Aliens?
Alien.
sucked?
Aliens. The very first Aliens was good.
No. First of all, there was one before that called Alien, you loser.
The one with Sigourney Weaver.
They almost all had her in it.
The one where the very first one, the very first episode ever, the one from the
Episode.
70s.
First episode of Aliens.
No, that one was all right. Aliens was still to this day my
Pull your
favorite.
mic a little
That's
closer,
one where
Jeff.
the Marines go there, dude.
Your opinions.
Pull your
Bill
mic.
Paxton, he's all freaking out.
Pull your mic closer, Jeff.
I don't think that was the one.
Right up in that mouth.
Where they're like,
First one's the best one because the aliens were actually kind of.
It
They
was-
weren't.
Are
so
you talking
in your
about the
face.
first episode?
you're first of all, the first one had one alien in it, hence the name Alien.
Right, and that was the best one.
Oh my god. The funny thing is, you probably haven't even seen this shit. Like, you probably have never watched it in your life. That's the best one. I like the first ones, the originals.
Pulled the carpet right out from underneath me. Yep, haven't seen it. What are we talking about? Aliens? What?
Yeah. No,
It's
so
Alien versus Pee-wee.
So the prequel, so we're going to talk about really, because last time we didn't really get to talk about the
We
name.
just kind of talked about what we're doing, like
Yeah.
work-wise, but we didn't talk about the
Ourselves.
podcast itself.
Well, nobody gets to know about, like last time we didn't really talk much about the term guerrilla social work and really what it means. So, because we had, talk about that, man. How did that get started?
Well, I don't know. A lot of it had to do with my experiences in grad school and kind of feeling like there was sort of one way to think about things, one way to do therapy, one way to look at the world. You know, the classic social work values that are expressed a lot are, social justice. And it just seemed that there was only one really prescribed method for getting there, and had that, pounded into my head a bit. And I don't know. I always felt like there was other ways of doing things, and I wasn't always able to fully be upfront or say how I really felt or what I really thought through a lot of my academic experience and kind of early on clinically as well. And so kind of guerrilla, if you've noticed, it's the Guerr for our listeners. It's kind of like the idea of a kind of a against the grain,
Dude, look, I looked it up right here. I got you.
You got it?
Dictionary.com, son. Says a member of a small independent group taking part in irregular fighting, typically against a larger regular force.
A small group, irregular fighting.
Referring to actions or activities performed in an impromptu way, often without authorization.
Google swooped in with a solid definition rather than me trying to muddle my way through it. That's I don't know. That's a lot of, I guess, what I felt, and so I didn't feel like there was a whole lot of people that really saw things my way. And select few, I don't know. It's there's not much of a forum for there being other ideas or other avenues to help people out. You know?
Well, so part of it though is like, why did you? Because essentially you're saying you're going against the grain, right? Right. So I mean,
going against the grain, but still maybe the same end result being the goal.
So before you go into that, dude, this is great. So you know how they give you the definition, then they use it in a sentence? Mm-hmm. This is awesome. So it says, this small town fell to the guerrillas, who then raped the women and burned all the children alive and ate their dead bodies. I won't tell you
Are
what
you on Urban Dictionary?
Yeah, what? What?
I won't tell you what parts I added to that, but I did. I did some impromptu adding there, but
Yeah.
it would have been cooler if it was like that. So.
I'm going to choose to believe it was that way.
So anyway, yeah, like, so when you say that, because obviously we all went through a lot of the same schooling and we're taught the same things, and I mean, I'm saying you decided to look at it a different way and go a different route, but I mean, like, so what, you know, what exactly? What was that? What was the impetus for that? What was the start of that?
So, well, I guess I'll just throw it out here. Well, back then I was quite conservative, still am in a lot of my belief systems. And I felt like I never really had the ability to well, I don't know, say it out loud. There was policy papers that I would write in, you know, social policy classes. I'd throw a conservative angle on it while still upholding social work values and ethics, as was the assignment. And I would get legitimately lower grades. And I'd be given the opportunity to recorrect it, because I go complain. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. If I didn't get an A on any paper that I did, what do I need to do to fix
all
it?
of them.
Yeah. I was a nerd in
How
school.
cute was your professor,
sure.
though? Was he a cutie?
Well, she was bulletproof to my charms, try as I might. So I actually had to be academic about it. Yeah, I'm not exactly a looker. So once we get video on this prequel or sequel or whatever the hell we're doing, y'all will be able to see. So I had to try to actually.
Yeah, there's only one prequel, but
yeah, well,
we're going to do a
what
series
about the
of
Star
prequels.
Wars, man?
There's a series
Star
of
Wars had a bunch
alien
of
movies.
prequels.
Stop going back into movies you haven't seen. Remember Star Wars and Captain Kirk? I'll bet though if you threw out he's like a Sex and the City
Dude,
savant,
nerds
though.
would get legit mad if they heard you say that.
Well,
Star Wars and Captain Kirk.
I know I'm making fun of you, bro.
Oh.
I'm saying though, if I threw out something about in Sex and the City, though, you're a savant at that.
Dude, Samantha.
I love throwing out the Star Wars, Star Trek things that don't make sense in
Intentionally.
group.
Yeah.
No, in group, because there's always a few guys that will laugh because they know you're kidding, but then they're like, "No, but seriously though, that's two different shows." I'm like, I know. Well, are they though? I don't know.
Trolling your group members.
Yeah.
So you went to go complain about your paper.
No, yeah.
You tried to seduce her and it didn't work.
Yeah, well, I mean, not on
What'd you
record.
do?
No, yeah. So I mean, I get like a B or a C on a social policy
C.
paper. I know, and I'm a damn good writer. I don't get B's or C's on
Dude,
papers.
C's
I
get
get
degrees.
A's.
C's get degrees.
What are you saying?
I don't. Alien.
Alien starts with an A. That's what I was aiming for.
It's pretty good. Prequel.
It is a prequel. So, holy cow. Yeah, I go in, I get a chance to redo my paper, and I'm good at arguing both positions. I'd turn it in with, a left-leaning conclusion with pretty much exactly everything else the exact same, and, presto chango, I get an A. And I hated that. I felt like a sellout because I was, I sold out. Didn't like it. Kind of felt that I was, still had good intentions of being a therapist, wanted to do a good job, but wasn't really able to. I felt like I had to follow lockstep. And so kind of guerrilla social work came from that. Mace also. So this is actually going to be this guerrilla social work podcast. We've got, Justin, he's maybe a little more left leaning. I'm a little more right leaning, and Mace might also be. I don't know if he's turned into a sissy, but I guess we'll find out. But
when you were, didn't you? This was back in like the Michael Savage days, right?
yeah, that was a
Which
big yeah.
Which he could barely listen to because he had an antenna broken on his car. Which
Yeah, I remember you blasting that at the first apartment we lived in.
Yeah,
dude. But didn't you call that guy? Didn't you call him, talk to him?
Yeah. I tried to get through. I got past the screeners once I explained my position, but he never actually picked up.
He doesn't really answer questions anyway. He just goes.
No, I know.
I mean, he's kind of fun to listen to at first because he's just like he's one of those dudes. You're like, what's he gonna say today? Because he's just
something awful. Something horrible.
The funny thing is he makes a decent argument and then ruins it immediately. It's like he gets to a peak and then totally blows
Starts
it.
Screaming into the microphone and
Alex
railing
Jones' brother.
Oh, he's like, he's I mean, I don't know, but like Savage is the only dude.
I love Savage. It's fun to
really
listen to him, but I don't. I mean, he just kind of goes anyway. Yeah, but go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, I didn't really know where else to turn, so I was calling. My plan was to be like, hey, look, I don't know what to do. I'm the only person in a class of 125 people that thinks this way. What do I do? But didn't get through. So again, just feeling kind of like. You can only I didn't like feeling like there was only one way to go about being a good therapist. I didn't like feeling that there was if you don't think this way, you're not doing your job as a therapist or as a social worker. I even hate that term, even though I am one.
What, social worker?
Yeah, I don't know.
You're a clinician, son.
I am.
Yeah, that's what you are. You're a therapist. Yeah. No, that was actually when you started talking to me about that. That was like the primary reason why I decided to go to BYU.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't even think I knew that.
Well, because I got my my first year I like messed up something on my U application. I only applied to the U, and then I took
you got turned down.
I know. Yeah,
got rejected.
Well, that's not what really happened.
You went up for a layup and got rejected.
And then I applied for like 5 schools a second. Anyway, but I went to the U orientation. I went to BYU orientation, and at the U, they had kind of just said, and they may have changed by now, I don't know, but at there, they were just saying, almost like verbatim, totally opposite. Like at the U, if you're here to be a therapist, you're in the wrong place.
Oh, yeah.
And at BYU, they're like, yeah, if you're here to be a therapist, you're in the right place. And they started talking about their pass rates and all stuff with their like test scores and everything like that. And I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds really good. But the thing that I liked about kind of what you were saying was, because even in my undergrad, I had professors that said you can't be a social worker if you have unless you're a Democrat.
You can't be a conservative and be a social worker. I was told that several times.
Which is so funny because like I think about that and when I was doing this I was listening to I listened to Savage, but Savage is a nut job, so I started reading up on it a little bit, and one of the things that stuck out to me about like conservatism. And I'm not a huge, I mean, when it comes to politics, particularly like social stuff, I'm kind of like, whatever. Like, I don't even care about any of that stuff. Like,
I might be a bit of a lefty socially.
Yeah. Well, but when it comes to like one of the basic tenets of that is is personal responsibility, right? Yeah. Personal responsibility is one of the main tenets of that. And so I was like, well, so as a therapist, isn't that what I'm attempting to do ultimately, is make somebody personally responsible for themselves,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm empowering that person to get to the point where they're personally responsible. And yeah, sure. I mean, don't get me wrong. I believe I love that we have a social safety net in terms of being able to help people who are down and out, because God forbid I'm ever down and out, then I want that to be there, right? So I thought that was a pretty good way to approach it, and it was certainly a different flavor compared to what I had gotten in grad school and everything. So I like that. And then where'd that term come from though? Guerrilla social work. I don't even remember that.
Somewhere between the two of us, we figured it out.
Yeah.
I don't think it came. I don't quite remember, but I mean the two of us kind of put that one together.
Yeah.
Felt like there was definitely a forum for thought. Like here's the deal: is like university. Universe is the root word, right? Universe, it implies all encompassing. Everything is supposed to be everything, and so when I get into these classes and I'd get legitimately lower grades on things, or I'd get. I mean, without derailing too much, there was a couple times where I'd speak up and quickly get shot down without ever having my thought even bothered to be explored or what my
Like for
motivations
what?
were.
Give me an example.
Well, so we were talking about gender. And I know. See, that's you're
Let me pause it.
You're pulling me into hot
Is there a
water.
bleep button, dude?
Yeah. Well, you asked the question, so here we go.
We're gonna go this route anyway at some point. We might as well.
Yeah. So, the topic was about how women are at a disadvantage compared to men, which historically throughout the U.S., hell yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, we're bigger and stronger, so
and cooler, and sexy. Sexier.
But I love it's just bigger, strong, it's just violence.
Yeah, we're way cooler. No, but the teacher brought up the wage gap being, women earn 78 cents to the dollar that men make, and I simply posed the question or the idea that, hey, I've actually heard elsewhere that if all other variables are controlled for, that actually things are quite equal, and in fact, women hold more advanced degrees, hold more higher positions and things like that. And I was just trying to get some talk going. I was like, is it possible that the statistics that we're looking at could be different than the way they're being reported?
Oh, dude, she threw you out, huh?
Couldn't even get the conversation off.
Wow.
Yeah. So I got
Isn't
a lot of scuzzies from my fellow classmates. And, again, it's not to say, I mean, my point was just that, if we're in a university setting and the point's academia and the point's to find the truth, whatever the truth is, even if the truth isn't pretty, the closer we can arrive to the truth, and that's important for actual progress. I haven't looked into it. Maybe the wage gap is real. I don't know. I just have heard different things from different sources. And
so you're just saying, let's generate some discussion and some dialogue.
let's generate some discussion. Let's at least make sure that what we're looking at and what we're claiming to be true is the case, because then we actually can help people if we're operating on facts.
Yeah.
I was just trying to get that going. Shut down a lot. So again, I didn't like that. I didn't like being in a university to where we're supposed to have this open forum of thought. Because look, even if there's good thoughts or bad thoughts, they at least should get playing time, so that the bad thoughts can be shot down on a factual basis, not because it sucks or because it doesn't fall in line with what the political bent on.
How long ago was that, though?
2006, 2007.
So a decade ago. Right? That's nuts because, I just think about if you, and I mean, this is a huge topic right now. I mean, a lot of people talk about this, and even Adam Carolla's podcast. He's trying to get a movie going, that you could donate to. It's called No Safe Spaces or something like that, where he basically talks about this. But it's nuts. It was happening a decade ago. Because did you see that shit with Milo Yiannopoulos down in
Berkeley?
So no, but I don't get me wrong. I mean, Milo says some nutty stuff, but
I had it good back then compared to now.
Well, the thing is he but that's the thing. Milo's Milo, and he says things to be provocative.
Well, that's his career.
So what I'm saying is okay. So if you disagree with that dude, right? Allowing him to speak and then sitting in on that would show exactly how preposterous he was, would it not? I mean, it proved to you that, oh yeah, man, I'm so glad I totally didn't. I listened to this because I truly do disagree with this dude.
But you had to be able to listen to him first, though.
Right.
If you shut down a form of speaking because it makes you feel uncomfortable, which again I could see how Milo rubs people the wrong way.
Yeah.
But if you shut that down, then you can't factually shoot down the points that you have contention with.
Yeah.
And that's what I found myself. That's a problem I found myself facing in school. I didn't feel like I was being given an education. I felt like I was being given an indoctrination.
Well, that's so weird though. It's so weird that happens, because that even happens in therapy. You know what I mean? Even with our clients here, the one thing that I think that I love about the work that we do here is, and that clients really like too, is that, I mean, if a dude, I think we talk about this in the first if it's not a prequel, what is it? A sequel. But what's a sequel?
Origins.
What's a sequel to a prequel? The first podcast we recorded, but not episode. So it's episode 2.
Rolls right off the tongue.
There you go. We talk about that I mean, if you're a client and you say a controversial statement in sex offender therapy, right? Which there's plenty of those things, right? There's plenty of those things. I mean, the first thing I want to do to that is say, thanks. I appreciate that you were able to be honest and say something like that in a group like this, because in other settings it's really hard to say those things. I did that just on Sunday.
Were you planning this the whole time? That was a seamless tie-in.
I know. No,
that was pretty.
I'm just a magician, bro.
All right, let's roll with this.
Yeah. So no, I did this. I did that just on Sunday too, because I had I had a ton of group members in there, and because Sunday is kind of like the island of misfit clients. Like they come, I have my crew, but then there's like a bunch of people that just show up because they're making up groups and everything.
If you're a Sunday client, he doesn't really mean misfit. He means you're a loser.
Yeah. But there was a client of mine, and I can't say his name, but you'll know who he is when so I had him down at the Fremont Correctional Center, and he got removed, and I thought he was going down for natural life because he had some pretty bad charges, and he violated for dumb shit. Like it was, going to Best Buy on leave, like so stupid, right? Mm-hmm. And going unaccountable and stuff. He went there, but he came back. And I saw him at Bonneville. I'm like, oh, dude, what's up? And I hadn't seen him forever, And we had a pretty good relationship. He had talked to me about some things he just never talked to anybody about. And he comes into group, and right out in front of the open, like starts talking shit and everything. And the other group members were like, whoa, like a couple new group members that were there, because there's 4 new guys there that night, and they had previously been in treatment in the prison. And they were like, oh my, but me and this guy had a relationship.
I know who you're talking
and
about.
He's totally allowed to talk crap to me, we had that's what I do with all my clients. We have, dude banter.
Right.
And so these guys were like on edge. And then another one of my clients was like, he's not like that. Just chill out.
On edge because they couldn't believe he was talking to you that way?
Yeah. They were like, they thought there was going to be like he was going to get thrown out of group or something like that. And because I was going over a topic that I had brought up before that he had sat in on, and he was actually giving me a compliment, because he's like, when you first started talking about this, I totally thought you were going a different direction. And then when we got to the punchline of the session, then he really felt good about it. And he's like, this is what, but he was talking crap in the meantime. So, but it was good, because some of those clients just don't they have a hard time being able to, bring that up in a group. So I like that we do that. That wasn't planned.
Well, no, I was gonna say that, when we talked about this in the sequel to the prequel, that like originally, at least the way I was brought into this field, specifically dealing with people that have committed a sex offense, I learned a very authoritarian, you are going to speak this way in group, both feet on the floor, hat off, no food or drink. And if you're going to describe your offense, these are the words you use. If you use these other words over here, you might go back to prison. And that never really felt like I was going to be able to get rapport up and going with these dudes that were petrified to say the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, Justin, you came into this mix well after, I guess, Mace and I kind of earned our chops, and you kind of got to see our approach from the get-go to where we don't have those rules in place, and I don't know what your experience has been with that. I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot with a question, but
I felt like I came in at a kind of an interesting time too, because I felt like I was kind of coming in more on the tail end of the authoritative kind of view, like government-wise, like the legislative side of things, as far as any knee-jerk reaction, any little things these guys do, they're going to be put back in jail, put back in prison. So I feel like, for one thing, your guys' philosophy and the way we've done things has helped influence that a little bit. So it's almost like I've seen kind of like real-world consequences kind of go down, but then kind of going back to the university side of thing, I feel like that is like times 10 gone through the roof, like in the like really extreme left-leaning like PC direction. Kind of like you were saying, like you're not allowed to even have an opinion. If you do, there's no discussion. You're just shut down and you're wrong. And shut up if you don't agree with what's being taught. Then
are you saying more so like now in our field of work, like specifically sex offender treatment, that at least in certainly in Weber County, and I'd say in Salt Lake County too, you're saying that the punishment end of it, the authoritarian. You've seen that go down.
Yeah, I feel like in a lot of ways that's become more like treatment oriented, like less knee jerk reactive.
And you think that's because of us?
I think we've definitely played a role. 'Cause I think there's been a lot of times where we'll advocate for a client like, hey, so-and-so messed up and violated and did this and broke this rule, but this is actually good that this happened, or it's good that he's talking about it because it gives him a chance to work on it. And I think, to the correctional officers, to their credit, some of them have been willing to try that out and see that it actually worked out. Like, hey, this guy stayed in treatment, actually worked on this and finished and moved on. I didn't have to send him back.
Well, I've gotten real-world feedback from the federal POs about that for sure.
Yeah.
So some of the guys we work with, Frank Davis for sure, big Alpha fan, and he's commented on that, just that the way that we're so willing to continue to work with these guys despite some of these problems, and we'd compared it one time. To when a drug offender comes into a drug program and then they relapse and you get thrown out. I'm like, I've never understood that.
Drug program.
It's so silly.
They're gonna relapse.
Yeah. But that's exactly like on a university level. So if I go into a class and I throw out a disagreement and throw some discourse, that's funny that you mentioned that, because dude, you want to hear what some kid got away with at BYU? And so BYU is pretty conservative, right?
I would say so.
Well, right.
Yeah.
So this kid, and I think one time you were talking to me about a paper you wrote on minimum wage too.
That was the one. That was the social policy one I was talking about.
That went south.
That I had to rewrite. Yeah.
Yeah. So this kid, dude, he did a comparative analysis, basically, this is so horrible. So about when Mormons were persecuted and what they did to overcome that, right? So where basically they said Mormons were not welcome anywhere, and because they weren't welcome anywhere, they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, pardon the cliche, came to Utah, made home here, and look where they are now. Now, to his credit, that's true, good for him. But then he did a comparative study because they were talking about social policy for Native Americans and how Native Americans were driven out, and basically he's all, and his paper was so if you were, luckily everybody in the room was white, but if you were Native American, it would have been the most offensive thing.
So
ever.
He was going the route of saying look at the natives, they didn't pull themselves out.
Right. So he said, so look at this, look at all of the money and assets that is being spent on this for people who basically took a victim stance and went to the, they could have done anything, and they just basically hung their heads and walk the trail of tears. And all. I'm like, oh my gosh, dude! You're and when I heard that, I was so again, that was a different experience for me, because I was like, man, you could say anything you want in this place, anything you want at all.
Experience to me,
yeah, it was crazy. But yeah, you can't.
But look, it's good that dude was allowed to say that, because comparing what the natives went through to, the Mormons went through some crap too, but comparing the two,
pretty shitty in comparison. It's apples and oranges.
But you can shoot it down though. You can if you don't allow that person to make his point, then he leaves with a bad idea that goes unchallenged, and he spreads that bad idea to whoever else. If it's in a true academic setting, then a bad idea gets exposed, which you could do on a factual basis with that type of thing. So it's good that he was allowed to say that.
The professor did shoot it down too, not in a way that was I'm not going to let you say this though. Basically, point by point, where he went way wrong, because it was just historical inaccuracies and whatnot and all that. But if you had just brought that, think if you tried to bring that up in school,
you couldn't even get off the ground with it. It would start a riot.
You'd probably
nowadays.
get stabbed out in the hallway.
You would get stabbed. You would get.
Well, I almost think it's gone the direction of kind of so being more on the left. One of the things I've taken up an issue with is the whole idea of a safe space, safe placing. I understand that to a degree. But to me, I don't see a university or a school as something that, in that sense, should be a safe place. Like, you should have your ideas challenged. You should have opposing points of views, so you actually get the chance to learn. Because I don't feel like university is go in with either you already agree with what's going to be taught, or shut up and just say you agree with what's going to be taught. Like,
what do you so you said you understand? What do you understand about that to a degree? Because like
the safe place thing.
Well, right. Because like this is my thing. I don't think there is anything on this planet you can say to me that will offend me. Like nothing. Like
Yeah.
I just don't really. I mean, and it's not a matter of
what if it does? What does it matter?
I just don't think like you, especially some stranger. Like you would have to matter to me in order for me to care what you have to say, right?
Well, that's how I think too. I want to hear what.
But that's what I'm asking though. I'm asking though, like so because I have a hard time understanding the concept. Like, how is everybody so damn offended by everything nowadays, right? So like when you're saying you understand it, like, I mean, the other side hasn't articulated it very well for me. So
I don't think that. So when we talk about like the other side, like I think there's many people that don't even agree on what a safe space is or what a safe place is. Like generally, what I hear is kind of like when I talk about like if someone really wants a safe place. Okay, to me, like a safe place would be okay. We can all in this room, in this classroom, talk that we have different points of view, but we're not going to attack each other. You know, nobody's going to be physically harmed, but you should express your point of view, not. If your point of view goes against the norm of the class, just don't say a thing, and if you do, you're going to get shut down and ridiculed and cut off. Like that's what I see it as. But where I think it's going is, it's kind of like I hear a lot on Joe Rogan's podcast, like the social warrior, that just wants to be offended for other people, and then offended by everything. So it's kind of like I want to jump onto this cause, even if it doesn't even impact me directly. But this person says something, I'm going to ridicule them and shut them down, like verbally threaten them or physically threaten them because they don't agree. Because it's kind of odd to me if I'm going to make this argument if I need a safe place to do this, but if you go against me, I'm going to make it unsafe for you.
Well, what's weird to me about that is that. So basically, what you're saying is, okay, say whatever your piece is, but just don't make it personal, and certainly don't let it get physical, or anything like. Don't throw insults. So I mean, like the weird thing about that is all the rules of arguments anyway existed prior to this. I mean, ad hominem attacks, like immediately. I mean, if you start doing that, you lose. Like you've lost.
Explain ad hominem.
Well, it's just like a personal attack against you. Like I would just be insulting the fact that you're a ginger, and
that's valid though.
I mean, yeah, like
I'll own it.
So I'd be like, so if I just threw that out there and say, well, you don't really understand this because you have no soul, and your face looks like a freckle grenade went off on it. Like, so
how have I not heard of freckle grenade?
So I mean, like, yeah, and you got weird skin, freak.
Just keep going. What else? What else?
But I mean, like,
big head.
But yeah,
ears.
I mean, like if you if you throw those out there, yeah, you just look like an idiot, But I mean, I agree, like if you can just have those discussions, but it's gone so poorly. But I mean, even, and again, I'm just because I like to tie it in. I just look at some of our clients that come into this program and like think about if you say the wrong word to a client, right? So if you call a client a lame or a punk or a bitch, I mean, I don't know why I'd call a client a bitch, but I probably would make the mistake of saying you're lame or calling them a punk, because those are kind of like, those are kind of,
they're pretty harmless outside of prison walls.
Yeah, and they're playful words, but in that respect, I mean, if you go into prison, it's like a whole other world. And I had to reference that too, because sometimes I'm talking to them about all these techniques and methods of social skills and everything, and I'm like, that place is la la land though. Like you can't, none of this stuff that we're talking about here. I mean, we were talking about masculinity yesterday, and we were going over this, right? And I was kind of talking about like the idea that part of this is masculinity doesn't always work in our favor. As much as I like it, I like being a dude, but I mean, guys are at a huge deficit when it comes into the eyes of the criminal justice system, because we're looked at as being more aggressive and more violent and more sexually driven, right? And the statistics would bear that out.
We're raised that way.
Probably
right.
True.
Well, and the biology would bear that out. I said, so we're not going to change that, but I said, so this is part of it. So can you change people's minds interpersonally and primary relationships in your life, because that's about the best you're going to get. And if I can adopt some of those feminine characteristics, and I say, so it's kind of interesting because you think about the big with sex offenders. When it comes to female sex offenders, man, they eat it up. People love those. People love those stories about the teacher hooking up with the students, right? Mm-hmm. Brianne Altice made national news, dude, right? And it's so funny when they were showing her picture on the news. It wasn't like the Gary Busey fucking mugshot or anything like that. It was like her glamour shot,
all
right?
Dolled up,
yeah,
looking pretty, yeah,
right. And it was, and I said, well, why is that? That's because when girls do something that's outside of a gender role or whatever, or the expectation of that, it's weird, and people pay attention to it. It's an anomaly. And I said, so guys can actually take that to their advantage too. The moment you show some emotion and some vulnerability and some compassion for another person, people pay attention to that because it's weird. It's weird when dudes do that.
That's kind of sad.
But it changes minds, though. It's it's
a good thing.
It's sad. Yeah. It's sad. It is. Yeah. But again,
look at that dude being caring. Weird.
Yeah, but it changes people's minds, and people really pay attention to that and care about it. And so when so I'm teaching that concept, right? But I was like, now don't get me wrong, this would never work in prison. It's not like, if some dude tries to take your commissary and you're like, you know what, you need this more than me, bro. Well, don't do that. Lace up.
The rest of your
lace up, son, and go and take it inside, because you're not gonna, because that's again it's a different world. But it seems like it's a different world too on like a university level, and as you come out, you really have to, you're really, even with therapists that start this program, you come out of the university and you're really trying to save the world, and it's like, okay, there's a reality to it though. Same thing with clients transitioning out of prison. You got to do a lot of teaching at that point, just to get them to, back to square where their social skills are on par with the rest of us.
Well, I think it's tough too, taking kind of this generation currently coming through school, going through that kind of environment in school, and then to me, even outside of how you're going to treat clients, but how are you going to handle a job where things don't go your way, or people don't agree with you? Maybe treatment team doesn't agree with the call, or a pro officer doesn't agree with the call. Is it going to be you're going to throw a fit and go threaten them and freak out about it? It's right. I think there's definitely a side of, we want to be aware of what we're saying to each other and how we're treating each other and learn from it. But there's also a side of, if we go around being offended by everything, for one, just on a personal level, you're going to be miserable all the time. Because there is an element of life that is kind of, suck it up. Yeah. You're going to get offended sometimes. It's choose your battles. Some of these things are going to be worth it. Some of them probably not. I can let it go. I can let it slide.
Yeah. What's the secret sauce for that though? Because people do. You can't.
The secret sauce for what specifically? For
not getting offended. I don't think it's confidence either. I don't think that's the answer. I think so again, you think about how many of our clients, particularly in the halfway house, right, where a cop says one thing to them sideways, and dude, they flip, and the problem is when they flip, they cause way more problems for themselves. Mm-hmm. And then it's easier then, because now they're in real trouble because they flipped out, right? And now they're getting in trouble and they're getting a sanction or something like that. Now they can even point the finger more and say, that's, there's the bad guy or whatever. How do you, what's, I don't know, maybe it is confidence. I don't know. What's the secret sauce to not getting offended?
That's what I think it is, though. I think it's confidence. There's not much that somebody could say to me to pull me into a fist fight or even a verbal fight, legitimately, save for me being attacked by somebody, you could pretty well call me anything.
Don't talk shit on chickens, though.
Yeah, except for chickens. They need to be free range.
Oh my god,
dude! We don't need to go to the chicken dolphin route.
Why not, dude?
Because it's off topic.
Oh, okay, yeah. I wouldn't want to talk about that either, Mister. Let's open this up for discourse, but we're not going to talk about that,
dude. I need a safe space.
I feel like I'm in the university right now.
I feel like I'm being attacked.
I wrote a paper, and you're your professor shutting me down right now. That's how I feel. Yeah.
Well,
I think there's multiple levels to that too, because there's kind of one of the, with the new group stuff that we have going, one of the the behavior chain analysis thing. It's kind of the first thought, and then the feeling that gets attached to that thought. So I think it starts with people's thought. Because I've noticed for me in sessions where maybe I'm really having like a pretty intense session with somebody and I catch myself kind of feeling like a little defensive or a little like I want to get on the attack, I kind of stop and I realize, well, at this point, am I just trying to get them to think what I think? Like, I want to hear my own words come out of their mouth. And when I notice I'm thinking that, I'm like, okay, that's mentally, I got to kind of say, okay, chill out. Like, find out more about what he's trying to say. Because it turns into a more of, I want to prove I'm right rather than I want to hear what you have to say.
I think you just hit, I think you just hit a very important second component. So if we're going to agree that confidence plays some role, whether it's the whole pie or a slice, I think that what you're talking about is a big piece of it too, and that's being able to catch yourself reacting emotionally, which is the core of therapy anyway. It's a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy is to be able to understand what you're thinking, realize what you're reacting to, and then to make a decision to maybe think or act differently. So this is the stuff that we preach to clients. And I'll admit too, there's times where clients will say something, and so a lot of times it's them not being accountable for their offense, or I'm trying to help them see something and they basically shoot my feedback down outright. I can feel myself getting aggravated, and that's my problem. Me getting aggravated is my problem. That's me. That's my own noodle brain and the thoughts I'm having that are causing me to be upset. And in the occasional moment that I'm sane enough to catch myself and not like react and be a dickhead to a client that I'm trying to help, that's just, their thinking's maybe a little off course. If I'm able to actually catch myself, stop, relax, and then, shift gears or do whatever I've got to do, that makes me, I think, more competent, and again, people that are reactive, people that when they hear a Milo Yiannopoulos talk at a university and they shout him down, call him Nazi, throw the ad hominem attacks, use straw man fallacy, appeal to authority, all the cool logical fallacies that we've learned not to use in discourse. The problem is that they're being reactive. That's their issue. And I think that a lack of self-awareness is what it boils down to. So maybe confidence confidence and self-awareness are two traits that people would have that would enable the type of safe space that Justin condones, the type of safe space that says, yeah, sure, we're not going to shoot each other down. We're not going to tear each other apart with arguments. We're going to maybe shoot each other's ideas down, but we're going to do it with sound reasoning.
Sure.
That's what I would have cringed at the idea that the Guerrilla Social Work podcast could be considered a safe space. It goes against everything I think I might believe, but by your definition, Justin, I'm on board.
Well, I think though, so the other thing that I think, okay, so you're saying confidence, self-awareness, but it also kind of, to both your points, it sounds like empathy is a huge component in there too.
Oh yeah.
Well, and empathy, that's a whole other podcast. I mean, it's a big concept.
Just do a quick definition then.
Well, the thing is that, so a lot of people, they hear that word and it's a very soft word, right? But really, I mean, it's really the idea of empathy, and it's kind of one of those holy grails of social work. Mm-hmm. Or not social work, holy grails of, well, it is a social work, but sex offender therapy in particular. So the typical line of thought is, if you just had more empathy for your victim, then you never would have done what you did, right? Which is like, okay, so you care about the harm that you caused to a person, but that's a false analysis, because empathy requires one thing and one thing only, and that's, can I understand or at least imagine and appreciate where another person's coming from? It doesn't. There's no prerequisite that you give a shit, though. Like, you don't. So that's where the mistake is made. Is that the assumption that if you understand where a person's coming from, that you then care about it. Okay, well, talk to Charles Manson about that, because that dude was pretty high levels of empathy, because he understood the people he was talking to and was able to convince them and tell them all the right things that they needed to hear, because he could imagine what they were thinking and what they felt at the time, and convince them to do things. Same thing was like, any of those guys who are able to do those type of things, Ted Bundy, whatnot, high levels of empathy. But we don't look at it like that. We call them sociopaths, right? It doesn't mean that they don't have a lot of empathy, though.
People often will say they don't have any empathy. Well, they don't have any compassion.
Correct.
Plenty of empathy.
So the next step is, if I give a shit, I have to have compassion for the person. But empathy is a good tool, though. I mean, so again, I won't go too long on that. I just want to say that if we're communicating and I'm talking to Justin, me and Justin disagree, having an understanding where he's coming from is important, right? I mean, like having an understanding, I was like, okay, well, why is this dude coming this direction? Why is he coming from that point of view? And in fact, if I'm getting into an argument with you, what am I trying to accomplish? What's the whole point of an argument?
Are you trying to prove your point and win?
Well, right. I mean, ultimately,
it's a debate.
The best thing to come from that would be for you to say, you know what, you're right. You know what I mean? So again, my ability to manipulate you into understanding my point of view and then agreeing with it requires that I understand where you're coming from too. Simply thinking that you're going to adopt my point of view is not ever going to happen with those barriers. I have to find a route based on my empathy to you. And same thing with a client. If I'm trying to convince a client of whatever this is, I mean, I don't do this by telling them, right? I do this by manipulating them to the point where they talk themselves into it, and then they get it for themselves. So it's like CBT is very Socratic,
or like
right?
a motivational interviewing kind of a deal.
Well, yeah, motivational interviewing is really good because it gets things up and rolling, and it makes the client start to think about these things, and it's very non-judgmental, hands-off approach. That's a motivational interview. I love motivational interviewing, but it's so technical. That's such a highly skilled practice, and it's so much to learn about that. But if you can get moving in that direction, again, a client can talk themselves into believing a certain way, which is really, I mean, it's almost like that movie Inception, like I plant an idea in your head, but you have to believe that you came up with it.
Yeah.
And that's not what we do. It would be a lot simpler if I could just hook myself up to somebody and go. But again, it's a much more complex thing. So empathy has to be a third component of that, because otherwise I'll be offended by everything, And so it's kind of like the officers of the halfway house. I'm always like, dude, if he treats you like crap every day, what do you think that dude's going through in his life that he would want? I mean, think about your status and his status. You're in totally two different worlds. I mean, you work at the dog food factory, bro. I mean, no offense, but this guy has a family and all this other stuff, and he's has authority. Why would he treat you that way? And then they start, I don't know, it always degrades into, he probably got beat up in high school and now he's wanting to be and I was like, no, that's not it. I mean, it could be any number of things. Like, think about some things, legitimately think about that. And then and that's a better way to come from. And again, it doesn't mean that he cares for that guy or excuses that behavior, and that's okay to treat him like shit. What it is now, it says, okay, understood, that's a little bit more acceptable. I'm not going to flip out now, because I'm not going to take this personally, because why should I? This is your problem. That's not my problem.
Yeah, and I think envisioning kind of end goal, like what is the point? Like, that was a big part of the problem I've had in the last little bit with kind of, I think, with some of the way the people, on the quote unquote left treat others, where there's kind of like, we all know, like the whole like bigot, racist, that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, if your goal here, like your outrage really is that you're concerned that people are being racist or reinforcing racist ideas, but your approach to them is to berate them and call them racist, what was the end goal there? To make somebody feel bad, make somebody feel inferior to you, which is kind of what you're fighting against. So it's like, if my goal is I want them to understand that a little more, why don't I approach them in a way that maybe opens their mind to that? And it's probably not going to happen in the moment. I think very rarely those cases happen where you just say something to someone and magically this light goes off, and like Mace was saying, like, oh yeah, I agree with you. It's usually kind of like, how can I have this person leave the conversation a little more open to the idea at least? But if I'm just attacking people or I'm just shutting them down, probably just reinforcing what they think already anyways. Dude, they're going to think I'm an idiot.
Even if you did think somebody was racist, like say that was the case, right? Yeah. So I'm getting into a conversation with somebody and I assume that they were racist, right? Mm. Okay, so if I throw that out there, I've done two things. I've proven that anything that comes out of your mouth from here forward is completely invalid. And two, I've said that to the other person that don't waste your breath, bro, because I'm not going to listen to you. Mm-hmm. So there's no point in any of that stuff. I mean, first of all, why are you even talking to a person who's racist? I mean, clearly it's starting to be irrational at that point. Throwing that out there does nothing for the conversation. I mean, if you, again, the route would be, okay, if you truly believe this person's racist, evoke that. If you're trying to win an argument, why don't you pin them into a corner verbally where they confirm that, And then you can say, oh, well, there it is. I don't need to do that. I don't need to call you a racist. I'll talk you into it, if we're going to do that whole thing. But again, I think it's just, I think when somebody throws that out there or somebody just gets offended, it's just an indication of how simplistic your social skills at that point are. And a cue to that person, I need to develop that more. Like, I need to develop that way more. Also,
how simplistic that person views the other person's point of view. If Justin and Mace are having this political argument and Mace does the typical thing of calling, the left-leaning Justin a snowflake, because that's what we're supposed to call left-leaning people now. And, Justin says, well, you're a bigot,
and what got solved there?
Here's the deal is that there is a lot more nuance in therapy, in politics, in just any of the day-to-day conversations that we have. And if you're willing to take a person's point of view and label them with a category, it's not about insulting them. Again, like, who cares? It's more about that you've taken a belief system that could have arrived at this conclusion from any number of different ways and just stuck it with a demeaning label that shuts down the conversation. Like, so Mace, when you were saying that, this, if you throw out the term racist, then any further conversation with this so-called racist or this snowflake, this pussy snowflake type person, any further conversation is pointless because, well, that person, they're a Nazi. They're a Nazi now. Yeah. So you're not going to have an argument with a Nazi. Their point's already invalid. So yeah, being able to have empathy for them and being able to, or empathy at least to understand their point. Because the beauty of it is you might change your mind. It's, again, not super likely in these types of conversations, but if you make a point of trying to understand where another person's coming from, that might allow them to let their guard down enough to try to see where you're coming from. Maybe you'll arrive at the truth somewhere in the middle.
Well, that's probably one of my favorite things to work with on my clients. Like, when something happens, because I think a lot of this is also just finesse. Like, how do you say something to someone as like an end result for both of you, like win-win? So one of my favorite things is like when someone's having like a battle with their PO or whatever, and they're pissed off and they're venting in the session, like, F him, blah blah. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go in next time. I'm going to say this, and it's kind of like a little bit of motivational. And you're like, okay, if you went in and did that, what would probably happen though? Like, if you said that to your PO, well, you'd probably be pissed off. It goes that route. So I'm like, I'm going to challenge. Just go in and say something. Try to say something nice of like, hey, I'm sorry about what I did, and I know that made extra work for you. I'm sorry. And I guarantee you will almost every time see a different. It's like they always come back and they're like, yeah, he actually was pretty cool about it. And I was like, this is the approach, because I'm like, the whole thing is you're mad you didn't get something because you want to have it or you want to move forward in your therapy and this, but you're just viewing it as like, oh, he's just black and white. He's just here to punish me. And if you treat him that way, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing. He's going to act that way. So if you go in and kind of show a little bit of you're getting how he sees things, that's going to help him, but more importantly, it's going to help you too. So it's how do I kind of finesse, like, what do I want to say? How do I want to say it that benefits me and benefits him?
Yeah, so you're just developing discrepancies at that point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of like, those are usually the organic ones are the best, where you can kind of say, well, wait a minute. So, you're just highlighting a contradiction to the client about a value that they're holding on to. Mm-hmm. Well, so on the one hand, you're saying you want to be independent, and you want to be able to make your own choices. But on the other hand, you're actively engaging in arguments with your PO, which is making things more restrictive for you, and you feel like you're getting blackballed, right? And but it's kind of funny because there's a couple different methods, because sometimes clients that's a sophisticated technique that sometimes clients are a little dim. They don't get that, and so you kind of have to force it. And it's almost like the future-paced directives that you give to them. So sometimes I try to, like what you're saying is, you can force a discrepancy. So you just throw something out there and you say, okay, so let's say you were able to resolve all these things with your PO and you guys are able to have an effective relationship. What do your behaviors look like in that? Say this is 6 months from now. What do your behaviors look like? And it requires them to think about that. And then they start developing their own discrepancy. And then you say, okay, so how's that differ than what you're doing right now, right? Or go in the past. You say, I can't imagine everything's always been this way. You've never gotten along with any type of law enforcement official ever. And usually they'll say, oh, well, there was a guard. And I'm like, yeah, what were you doing differently back then? What was your approach towards that back then? And then you got to stay away from, well, they were, I don't care what they were doing. What were you doing is really what's important, because you have to be, and again, I think sometimes that helps with a client. I think at times we're helping them learn higher level social skills than even some of the people they work with. I mean, sure. I think the POs, I love how the POs approach the things that they do, because I just try to tell clients, don't ever make that mistake that your PO is going to be your therapist. That is a law enforcement official, dude. Yeah. He is protecting the community. You're not their client. They're not like, I mean, I'm sure it's easier on their caseload that you are successful, but they are not here to enable you to be successful.
Like, two very different roles.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Therapist and probation officer. I like the difference as well. I like that it's that the officers have their own way of approaching the clients and that we have our way. Their way is predictable, which again makes our job easier in helping them learn how to relate.
Yeah. You know? Well, I think so. Ultimately, though, at that point, this is the thing. I think if you're a therapist, a budding therapist coming into this world, right? You'll have to learn quickly that this is, particularly if you're coming into forensic therapy, like all that stuff that all that stuff, protesting, all the safe space, dude, get real. It's not, none of that stuff exists in this world. And so I think that, and you can adapt, don't get me wrong. Of course you can adapt, right? Mm-hmm. But all that, like, there's a reality to everything too. And you have to learn that really quick. And it's sometimes too much for some people. I think it is not doing a student, I mean, unless you're staying in academia, it doesn't do a student any good, clinically and or otherwise, to not let them go through that disagreement and learning to be confident in their own arguments, in themselves, and trying to have empathy for other students and other opinions and moving forward. I mean, I think those are the only people you have to work with anyway. Then you should learn from that when you're coming out and to be in this field. That's probably a good way to kind of think about it.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Not having things go your way is, I mean, again, it's cliche to say, but that's what builds character and growth. And I don't know, I hope I don't do this too often during these podcasts, but I kind of have to go the route of talking about Jiu-Jitsu. So Jiu-Jitsu, it's a submission grappling martial art. The idea is to make your opponent give up, typically through choking them or bending a joint a direction it's not supposed to go.
Jeff's a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, by the way.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't feel like it. I get my butt kicked by people with a couple years experience now and again, but
Walt Bayless, bro.
That's the thing though, is I will lose to people that on paper I shouldn't lose to. And then I'll get victories over people that on paper should beat me. But ultimately, a lot of what happens is Jiu-Jitsu is very technical. If you watch it on the television, it looks like two dudes rolling around hugging each other, and it is that. But there actually is quite a bit of technique involved.
Horrible hygiene.
Lots of ringworm staph. Cool stuff that I've contracted. But it takes a lot of being willing to lose again and again and again and again and again and again. It's nonstop. I've lost probably more than I've won if I count. And the thing is, that's where I've learned, to be able to like pick up and learn a specific technique. It's the hard way every time in jiu-jitsu. It's never easy. It's the hard way every time. And there's certain ways to get out of certain positions and this and that, and sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't. Sometimes the person's just better than you, but ultimately the mat doesn't lie. Like the truth is, you either won or you lost. And I feel like for me personally, it's been it's helped me grow a lot as a person, as cheesy as that might sound, because I've had to deal with being humble. I've had to deal with getting beat again and again and again and having to face myself and deal with it. And in a safe space, you don't have to deal with that defeat. You don't have to deal with an opponent that might be intellectually superior to you. You don't have to deal with an opponent that might have facts that don't sit well with your emotions. And so in never having to face that, you never grow academically, you never grow intellectually. You stay flaccid and your brain is vapid and just you don't go anywhere. You just become this. I don't know. It's not a space to where we're trying to find the truth or the reality of a matter, in a safe space. On the mat, you find reality. Like either the technique works and you win, or it doesn't work and your opponent chokes you and then you clearly lost. There's something nice about the reality of that truth, and that just doesn't exist, I don't think, to the degree that it should in our everyday discourse.
So if you think about therapy, it's almost kind of like mental jujitsu in its own way. That sounds so lame. I know.
Yeah, and it does until you unpack what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, if the way you describe jujitsu, that's exactly like how I would. That's how I think that we conduct what we do, and it's not the only thing I would counter to that is it's not a fight, right? I mean, it's not like I'm challenging. I'm trying to submit a client to my will. Again, I might have all the answers for that person, or at least think that I do, but unless they come up with those organically on their own, it's not going to matter. But it's almost you told me this story one time about a guy that was down there at Westside Jiu-Jitsu, right? And it was an older guy who trained with Mark Johnson, and he was so he did a bunch of private lessons with Mark Johnson and just learned all the technical stuff about it.
Yeah.
And never did any real world grappling. So never just got into the thick of it, right? Which was because I think about like when you were talking to me because I'm the exact opposite, because I don't like learning the technical stuff. I just rely on
You just want to go
brute strength. So I figure like I'm always been like, if I'm just stronger, I can beat everybody which is the dumbest approach ever. But and then that guy came into a class and just got worked. Like he was doing like a year of private lessons or something like that, or maybe even more than that.
Didn't show back up.
Right. And you would think that guy would, but that speaks to it. I mean, if I'm in school and all I'm getting is knowledge, which, I mean, you could get knowledge in classes and score, get straight A's and score really good on your exams and everything. But if you're not willing to engage in that discourse with one another and be willing to, like you said, be beat down mentally by a superior,
like a state debate champ.
Yeah, like
Mace Warren.
That's true. Was it? No, it was 2000, dude. Okay. Come on. Yeah, or 99, one of those two. Yeah. But yeah, if you can't, just admit that defeat, which is good. I think like you're right. It builds character. That struggle super important. Going through that struggle is pretty meaningful for anybody. I mean, struggle I think is what drives us, regardless. People in general.
It is, and the unpredictability that comes. So, in a therapy session, and Mace was talking about mental jujitsu, and laughed at himself for being corny. But this morning during a group, one of our clients was saying some things. Again, I felt myself internally bristling at a little bit, because he was saying that he knows for a fact his victim is 100% okay with what he did and has not been harmed by it absolutely whatsoever. He was very adamant about this position. And so, I tried a couple of different techniques to try to get him to see that maybe not everything is as he thinks it might be. And he dug his heels in. And my natural reaction would be to come down on him for lacking empathy, for maybe allowing himself some degree of he's telling himself that so that he doesn't have to deal with the awful implications that he seriously caused damage to this girl that he victimized. Upon recognizing that he was doing it because he probably feels super self-conscious and knows deep down, maybe on some level, I resisted the urge to go full force against him. I had to get kind of clever. I went a roundabout way of talking about other people in his life, and if he can presume to know what they're thinking right now, I think I'd asked him to consider, what is your mom thinking right now? Just kind of go on that route. And I was a bit of a smart ass with him, but eventually he was able to concede that, in fact, he can't be sure that his victim is 100% okay with what happened. It was a really small victory, but it took me kind of pumping the brakes a little bit on me getting agitated with this guy for saying something so obtuse. But he showed a glimmer of coming around, and that's fine for now. That's fine for now. Next time we can get him a little bit more along the way.
Well, it has to go in steps because in that moment, there's probably not one single thing you could have said where legitimately he'd be like, "Oh my gosh, you're right."
Never
you're totally
would've-
right. Yeah, there's no way. It has
180-degree
to
turnaround.
has to
no
be
way.
a series of small nudges in a certain direction, I think.
Exactly right. And it took me being, I guess, aware of it and switching to a different technique. So again, to keep falling back on jiu-jitsu, if any of you guys have looked at other martial arts, like everything's very choreographed. It's like if I throw this.
No, the Karate Kid was
yeah, it was legit.
totally
right?
legit.
Totally legit.
Dude, like that show.
Look,
really good.
if you can wax on, wax off yourself to a championship in a martial art, you need to find a new martial art.
You can throw a back break
Was
kick.
it Elizabeth Shue that was in that?
I think it was Elizabeth Smart.
It was pre-kidnap. Dude, she it was Elizabeth Shue. But I love the crane kick though, like that like you choreograph. I know exactly what you're gonna do, dude. Like, I mean,
That's how good it is, though.
How
You
on
still can't
earth?
stop it.
No can defend.
The funny
No
thing
can
about that
defend.
though, is the choreo. The funny thing, of all of the fake nonsense that was in that, the one part that was the fakest part of it all.
What's that?
So Ralph Macchio is sitting of course he's playing that shitty karate game in the bowling alley or something, and Elizabeth Shue, the fakest part of it all, she comes up to him and she says, "Hey, are you going to the karate tournament? The whole town's going to be there."
No, they're not.
It's like, what town are you in, dude? That's the fakest part of the whole thing, dude.
I've been to some high level jiu-jitsu tournaments, and it's like 12 people in the crowd.
Yeah. Tap, snap, or nap.
Snap, snap, or nap.
Oh, toothless dude.
Yeah, bunch of weirdos.
Yeah.
But the choreographed stuff that you'll see in like those types of shows are these things like again, the crane kick, no can defend. Well, I mean, the reality is nothing exists like that in real life. There's no,
that's real.
I think on Napoleon Dynamite, the Rex Kwon Do dude, there's kind of a parody. He's like, grab my wrist, no other wrist, no your other wrist, or something to that effect. like in that world, like that, those techniques don't work. And again, in jiu-jitsu, you don't know what the other dude's going to do. He can do almost whatever he wants, save for maybe a couple things, and you have to just deal with it. And so in a intellectual debate or in dealing with a difficult client or having a political discussion, you have to be ready for anything and be ready to come. You're going to be more mentally agile that way. You're going to be more well-rounded for it. And the moment you start to retreat to a safe space because you don't like what they're saying, everybody loses because you don't get to the truth of the matter. Even if it's a bad idea, don't get a chance to challenge it. I don't like it.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
No, I think that's good stuff, man. I think, and it speaks a lot to. I mean, we started this trying to define guerrilla social work. I don't know if we really did a great job there, but we got off onto a tangent. It's going to be mostly like that anyway, right?
Yeah. Yeah, if the listeners haven't noticed, I think we thrive a lot better on just kind of talking about what comes to mind rather than trying to talk to you like a PowerPoint or something. Hopefully,
I do really good with PowerPoints, bro.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty good.
I always love when people just read a PowerPoint to me.
Oh, brutal.
No, that's cool.
I know how to
That
read.
doesn't work. That doesn't work. So what is guerrilla social work then? If we're going to kind of wind down and conclude this, I mean, if we're talking about this kind of small tactical group using unconventional methods to topple a larger power, I don't know. I think we kind of explained that.
Yeah, especially with regards to this field of treatment. I mean, I don't think our philosophy is 100% unique. I mean, we've borrowed a lot from a lot of different places, but I mean, definitely and it's not a softer approach. I don't think that's it. I think
we hold them accountable. We're just humane to them.
I think it's more of it's more of just a rational approach to kind of resolving these things. And again, I think it's a recognition that the clients that we work with are going to be able to, if I try to get into a shouting match or anything like with a person who's if they are a career criminal, Yeah, right, man. Like, you know, I mean, it's just not going to work out very well in my favor.
Well, so in the end, due to the power that your position has, you might get verbal like submission. Like in the end, then maybe they're just going to say what you want to hear, but that'll be it.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is what happens a lot of times in maybe some of the more archaic forms of therapy that's existed in this field.
Well, it kind of goes back to just like the ultra basic rule of the golden rule. Like I try to think of if I had gone through what this person had gone through, what would be most likely to get me to open up? Like what approach would most likely get me to like be honest here and talk about stuff?
So in other words, using empathy.
Yeah.
But that's tough. I mean, like I think it's good to recognize that some people are not cut out for that though. Like mean, because you're asking a lot. Like you know, this is different than like you know, a client coming in with mental health issues and by no fault of their own, they're diagnosed with bipolar, you know, and it's causing a lot of problems in their life. Well, easy to have compassion for that person, right? These guys, like when you ask that question, what if I imagine what this guy? A lot of people say, I don't give a shit what they went through. They cause a lot of harm. Yeah, they cause a lot of harm, and I recognize that too. The problem is that it doesn't mean that they're not coming back into the community.
It doesn't fix anything.
Right. They're going to need the help. We have to. So in that respect, if the guerrilla part of the work that we do in this podcast is more about the unconventional nature of the way that we approach treatment and our philosophy, then I think it speaks really well to that, and that it's certainly going to. What I would say is anybody listening to this moving forward will, especially when we start talking about different topics, right? So in our next episode, we're going to be talking about motivation to change, and you know, it's a really deep kind of topic that I think you're going to hear a spin on it that you've never quite heard before, and that's going to be beneficial to you as a listener, as a client, and as a therapist. I think it'll give you some more tools in your toolbox, regardless of who you are. So that's kind of the real, I think, the nature of this podcast. So I mean, I think will be why people want to listen to it.
Okay. So I guess stay tuned for the sequel to the prequel.
No, the sequel to the sequel of the prequel.
That's right.
There it is.
Yeah.
Episode 3
coming up.
That's easier.
Yeah, that's way easier.
Do we say goodbye?
All right. See you, everyone. All right, everyone. That does it for the second episode of the Guerrilla Social Work Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out on all the social media jazz out there. You can check us out on Facebook, Twitter, all that fun stuff. It's Guerrilla Social Works. That's Guerrilla, Guerrilla Social Work. Reach out if you have any questions. We'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, we will see you in episode 3. Thanks.